There she is. Oh, I said that after I hit record. When I hit record, my AI companion on Zoom yells at me, and it's a female's voice. I didn't mean there she is. I meant there Raffi is.
Oh yeah. Well, I heard the girl. I kind of figured you meant her.
Yeah, yeah, but maybe the listeners don't hear it, so
Oh,
that's who
okay,
I was
okay.
speaking with. That's who she is. That's my AI Zoom companion.
Yeah, I don't identify as a woman.
We were just talking a little bit off camera about astrology and uh, what your expertise are in and kind of where the energy is shifting. You kind of care to share where we left off at?
Yeah, just talking about, and this is what's lighting up the entire astrology community, but I do, mundane astrology, predictive astrology, vibrational astrology. Those are really what I'm getting into. Uh, and it's really incredible to see all the different methodologies that they have, though, with astrology. But the just background energies right now, with the North Node in Pisces being tied to the spirit realm and to the higher self and all that, and all of these planets that have been coming into Aries, going back out into Pisces, and now kind of making that final run into Aries with Mars in the background here, like going out of the retrograde it was in, almost out of its shadow here. It might actually be out today. I'm not sure actually. We're getting close there actually. Uh, but yeah, and that's really bringing the drive into people to go after things from a spiritual sense, who feel spiritually connected and take action on these things with that Aries energy, and really be able to identify the things that they want to do,
Right.
because it is tough when it's coming from a spiritual place, but
Yeah.
identifying it within themselves and then within the outside world too. And then with the North Node and Pisces, we've got South Node and Virgo, so these are the types of things that we're leaving behind or we need to let go of. Kind of deals with past life stuff too, but in this context, I wouldn't say so much. It's kind of more what we're moving away from. And with that Virgo energy, and I'm a Virgo ascendant too, so it's been a little difficult, but letting go of just everything being perfect and organized and looking the way that you want it to look, and having that like routine and the schedule, and like I need this here, I need to do this at this time,
Yeah.
blah blah blah, and just kind of letting go and letting yourself flow into it. So it's kind of that dynamic of the way we're headed and what we're leaving behind, with that backdrop of all these kind of different fire energies moving out of the water and all that. And then yeah, what you were saying though, if you wanted to repeat that, just about where you've been guided. And
Yeah. Yeah. I since I had my experience about 8 or 9 weeks ago in Costa Rica, I've you were mentioning we're entering a time where people feel guided towards a certain way, and I followed up by saying that that's the way I felt, especially recently with everything that I've been working on, whether it's been the baseball scouting job, my football scouting job, this podcast, an LLC that I purchased, an e-commerce store that I'm currently working on. I've been really, really busy, and I I'm constantly being pushed, and in a good way, not in a bad way, but I'm also allowing whatever's picking me up to pick me up. And that was actually like a big thing for me when I came back when I was in Costa Rica doing the ayahuasca, was surrendering and not allowing my ego to get in the way uh, of progression in my life. And as I continue to be guided, um, I, I talked about this actually just most recently with my friend Tyler on an episode I shot, you know, before this. Um, there's byproducts of what you're doing, and then there's the main reason. And one of the discussions we had was about this podcast. Subscribers are a byproduct. Am I doing it because I love it, or am I just doing it for the wrong reasons? And those reasons, whether it's gathering attention, that's a byproduct. And the pure intention that I have here is just open dialogue for people, and for people to talk with each other and listen to each other, and for other people to feel like they're a part of the conversation. And that's what's most important to me. I feel like we have way too many influenced people, whether they're paid by sponsors or paid by, um, certain interests that may influence a certain discussion. And, there's some out there that are bigger that aren't that way. And I respect that. And I want to continue that trend because I feel like a neutral dialogue is the most important dialogue for people. And that's kind of the way I'm being pushed right now. And it's it's definitely special. Whatever's happening right now is really, really special. And I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. And it's good. It's very good.
That's awesome to hear too. Like,
Yeah.
especially because it is there's this disconnect within the society, or this fragmentation of a lot of people who aren't willing to let go of this old system. And this is kind of where, like, where Pluto comes in. That Pluto energy is about, rebirth, or death and metamorphosis, all of that. And that is really like the energy that we're going into. So when we saw 18 years ago, as it moved into Capricorn, it was very much about, like, what can you show in terms of work life, your public life, like the business cards and all of that,
Hmm.
uh, what your accolades are. But under the Aquarian energy, it's now moved into, which was right at the end of last year into the beginning of this year, like the last month there. It's all about what networks can you create. And this gets into the AI that's going to be rolling in the next few years, because this is like a 19-year cycle. It kind of depends on which sign it's in, whether it's like 18 or 19 years for that Pluto.
Yeah.
But like, what networks can you create? What technologies are you going to be able to utilize? And it's about the people, and what the people are wanting. And in the lower octave of that is, there's going to be a lot of people who are like followers on a lot of things, and are only going to do what the people around them are doing. But the higher octave is those who are connecting with people on a personal level, like you're doing. So that's why it's so interesting that you're guided. Like, those are the things that we're going to be called to do, what's going to be successful and all of that. And I guess bringing that back around is, there's just this old way that people aren't letting go of, and it's tough when all you do is figure things out, not through your internal compass, but what you're seeing coming through in the media and the outside world. And that whole media really is like, as we see Neptune move into Aries and all that, that's definitely going to ramp up with how extreme the media is. And that'll make people double down on certain things, on ideologies, and everything
Yeah.
really, which will just create more of a fracture within that. But people like yourself, people like myself, that are really trying to be as connected as we can, because of course we're not like perfectly in tune and connected people and always like zen and all that. We're humans with having a human experience with responsibilities and lives and all that. But just being able to listen to ourselves and kind of see how much it's all ramping up in the world,
Yeah.
it guides us to this place where we can be of use to the creator, to our higher selves, and really just start to do that work. And I feel like that's what we're both really moving into, in a way that we can service people.
Speaking on that Capricorn energy that you had mentioned, it's the external appearance is what was so prominent. I feel like there we've gone through a cycle of ultimate validation and materialism. And do you think that those two coincide with each other with that Capricorn energy? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's just such an incredible intuitive hit for you to bring up too, because it really is that, like,
Hmm.
that material level, and tying that into back to that public life, or what's being presented to someone. Yeah, it's very much. I I find it interesting that with the Capricorn energy, it's tied to Saturn, and I think that we're looking at the ways not only in which it has limited us, but our society has forced us into this box where we're not allowed to progress unless it's under a certain control, unless it's under the control of the systems. What's approved, what's not approved. And then you've got the whole idea of a cancel culture, and that kind of aspects other planets too,
Yeah,
and how that played out. But definitely, it's like, oh, well, we can't control where this ideology or this mode of thinking is going to go, so we've got to shut that down.
sure,
And
sure.
what was that with that original point you were making? Well, I'm trying to. What was your second point on that? I'm so sorry. I think there was something else I was gonna say with that.
No, just overall the Capricorn energy. You had mentioned the like business cards, like that, those kinds of things, that external view from what people see on social media is so important to a lot of us. You know, how many likes do you have? Do I need to do more to get that validation? And that's kind of what I was asking about. Because I feel like even today, especially when you scroll through reels, it seems like the trash gets heavier and heavier in reels as far as like thirst traps go. You know, it's like how much farther can it go? And it's something that I strongly disagree with. And it no matter how often you try to swipe up and just go to the next thing so it's out of your algorithm, it always finds its way back in, and it's honestly not my thing. And I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand with the whole validation point that you're making with that Capricorn energy, is because people, a lot of people want the feeling of being wanted, but do people also want that feeling of that people want that feeling of being desirable, but they also want that feeling of being lusted after, because that's kind of that's a very negative energy that you're bringing upon yourself. And while it feels good to be desired, at the same time, there's never a pure desire in that form, at least. In some other forms, you know, there are pure desires, but it seems to me that that's something that is really affecting our current culture. And social media is something that's so new to us. I mean, even though it's been around, let's say since 2007, MySpace, it's still new, relatively new. We look back on the whole idea of a 9 to 5 job as an idea of actually being new, because it's something that really started in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And that is still new to us, something that we're still adjusting to. Women going to work is something new that we're adjusting to. So social media in the grand scheme of things is one of the newer things that we're dealing with in this day and age. So I feel like there's a lot of confusion out there when it comes to that. But as like what you're saying, and maybe what I'm saying earlier about being having that guide, that push, maybe that's that with that astrology, that's that energy that's being pushed for people to act that way. Is that am I totally off with that
No,
question?
that's like super insightful, because what we saw too in the last degrees of Pluto in Capricorn was that rise of OnlyFans.
Yeah.
And it's like with those last degrees, there's this type of desperation that
Hmm.
come, or I got to get it done, like as soon as possible. So there was this push, and it's just funny how it hits on the collective level subconsciously through the spirit, like really like where, depending on where a person's at spiritually. But that final push for, I need to have the money to be able to show off I'm successful, and by
Yeah.
any means necessary. And so that comes up. And when you really look at the person who even created OnlyFans, and what their background is, and that this person could very well, very easily, because of their friends and associations, understand Kabbalah, understand energy work, the astrology and all that. And I mean, because it's like, did they just, is that the life that they're living, where that was something they brought out at the time where it would be utilized by the collective in order for us to learn this on the other end of it?
Right.
Or did they just see that opening in the astrology and take the opening? It's kind of one of
Yeah.
those things where it could really be either way.
Right.
But yeah, and a lot of with the social media there too, I've always thought of social media, and this kind of gets back to our last conversation, where a lot of the things that Uranus rules are that are they're essentially Mercury on steroids. So like with, and then like some people would say Neptune, because Neptune can be media too. But the networking aspect of the social media would definitely be very Uranian. So it's like us interacting with each other, communicating that mercurial way, but it's taken to the next level in the technology with which Aquarius rules, and that's the ruling planet there. Uh, so I like really tied into that, and and this gets into the Pluto Aquarius too, and just like feeling that energy coming on, the ramping up of the social media. I mean, even I look at now where we're at with social media and how frequently we're accessing it compared to even 5 years ago. It's just so much more. And then you can look at
Mm.
like 10 years ago and all that. But yeah, just these transits are so slow, you can just feel them as you come into them, and you see little ripples and bleed throughs of it. So it's very interesting though with the OnlyFans thing there. And now all of a sudden, as we're hitting all of these energies, especially in Aries, especially where we're getting into the masculine energy taking back over, because we got so far and so deep with the Neptune and Pisces, the spiritual planet being within that realm of sensitivity and all. It was all about like, oh, I'm triggered with this, I'm triggered with that, and like this, you didn't use my pronouns, oh my goodness. And like it's the end of the world, or like the death of someone's soul or ego or anything.
Look what I wrote down. Wait, hold on. Is it gonna get better? No. I wrote the word triggered.
Oh yeah.
'Cause I
That's
was
so
gonna ask I
funny.
was gonna ask you about that. I didn't mean to cut you off,
Yeah, no,
but
that's
I
but really with that, like and people, you can see people as we move these planets, the Neptune going into Aries, we're
yeah,
definitely going to see that. And this is like a 13-year cycle. So
yeah.
we're going to see that as just something that totally goes away. People, it's going to be kind of more of a fuck your feelings type of thing. I
I like
mean,
the
not that extreme right away, but
right.
people, when you hear people just complaining about like, oh, this really got to me, and I don't know how, but it's just not going to work anymore. And you can see it right now too.
It's
And
starting.
people can blame this. Yeah, people can
Yeah,
blame this on the politics if they want, but I mean,
yeah,
it really is the astrology that goes with it,
yeah,
and you could be like, well, did the politics play out the way they did because of the astrology? So people are
yeah,
fed up with that. It's going to be, and then Saturn hasn't even come into Aries, and that's coming in, that, and that rules, of course, Capricorn and Aquarius. So we're going to see that bleed into the social media and the technology, and the way that we're networking in the workplace and all that. And Saturn is, it's a bigger planet. So you feel that presence even like a month out, definitely, as that's coming in, because you see like how in the workplaces they're getting rid of all the DEI stuff, and
yeah,
and also with Aries being that beginning energy, that start of something new. Like we see all these old systems that are in place
yeah.
getting restructured and coming into that. So
The reason why I wrote down the word triggered because I'm curious. I was just asked this today. I'm curious about you. When was the last time that you were triggered?
uh
If you want
I
to think
would.
about if you want to think about it a little bit, I can give you my answer first.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
because it's been a while.
Yeah, no, mine too, and I had to think about it. It actually I didn't have to think about it long because I think it was really the only time in my life I really did get triggered. And it goes back to 2020, which was such a stressful time. And anytime you say 2020, everybody knows what 2020 is. It was such a disruptive time in our life. And me personally, I, you know, I felt a certain way about the whole George Floyd thing, the whole George Floyd riots and all everything that was happening around that. And I posted my opinion on social media and I isolated half my friends. And I realize now that that's not important. Just because we disagree on something doesn't mean that we can't be friends anymore. And while I'm entitled to my opinion and they're entitled to their opinion, I think maybe more open dialogue would have been handy because we we allow words to shoot at each other like they're bullets. And instead of treating them that way, we need to I I think, and this kind of comes to the whole fuck your feelings premise that you have is like it's just a word. If you say a certain word to somebody that doesn't speak any English, doesn't know any English, right? It doesn't mean anything to them. It doesn't. And if they said the same thing to us in a language that we don't understand and that we haven't heard from one of our friends that were in high school that would only teach us dirty words, we also would be like, okay, what? What are you trying to say? And I feel like I, first of all, I want to apologize to all the people that felt isolated, whether they hear this or not. I think it's important because I'm not changing my stance on how I feel. It's how I feel, and I have that right. But I also just want to say to those people, maybe I was a little, my message that I delivered wasn't the right way, and it's something that shouldn't affect a friendship and shouldn't cause turmoil because at the end of the day, those things that are going on, what do they actually, how do they really actually affect us in our every day to day life? They don't, right? I mean,
Yeah.
not too much, but if they do, we adjust, and we always have adjusted. That's the whole point of being a human is adaptability. We adapt to everything. So, first of all, if anyone ever listens to this that, was triggered or upset, I just know that I was also triggered and upset, and the system worked. The system worked exactly how it was supposed to work. And it it's okay. And I'm sorry. That's all I got. How about I gave you a little bit of time. What are you thinking?
Uh, I think I do think because I was really involved on Facebook during that time too. I think a lot of us were because we're stuck in the house.
Yeah.
Uh, I was at the beginning of overusing and abusing alcohol at that time.
Yeah.
So a lot of when I would get into it with people, at least my view from where I was standing in my experience was I would never start it with getting personal or argumentative or anything because I love to just have open discussion, like you're saying, because a lot can be solved with open discussion.
Yeah.
So if someone came at me, I'm over here just like on a good buzz, like having fun. And I grew up on World of Warcraft. I'm kind of a troll.
Oh yeah.
So I would
Xbox
just be like
360, all
laughing
that.
the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What really stood out to me though was it's so funny because of where the alignments go on this too, but it was actually the
Yeah.
beginning of that Neptune Pisces, which I was relating to that triggered energy.
Right.
And this was around the time that I came out as gay. So it was
Mm.
it was the things that were triggering me then
Yeah.
at the end of high school and going into that college space and really they got me pulled into that with the I guess you can say the liberal ideology. It's I think there's been an exposition of the liberal ideology, especially the last couple of years. But now we're moving into this exposition of the Republican and MAGA ideology, and we're seeing a lot of that spill out and where that's inconsistent too. So I'm not
Yeah.
even coming after just liberals or anything,
No,
but as
right.
far as like that side of the ideology which pulled people in and swept people in during these transits, I mean, I definitely got pulled in the first half of it, and then when I saw Trump come along and all the news that was going on because I would just go to the gym. I would turn on CNN or
Yep.
MSNBC, and I was like, oh, okay, like it looks like I'm voting for Hillary. Cool,
Yep.
and then they just kept upping the ante, and I was like, oh, that's a lie. Like that's interesting, but whatever. Like I vote Democrat. Like that's what my family does. So I'm just gonna do it. I'll show up and do my thing.
Yep.
And but it just got so extreme at a certain point. And this is in 2016. I mean, it's
Yeah.
gotten more extreme, But
Yeah.
at a certain point, I was like, okay, I'm gonna really sit down and do some research. And back then, I mean, the things I'm always researching. That's how I've been my whole life. Like I love it, but back then I was more into UFO whistleblowers and spirituality, that kind of stuff. Not extreme on astrology, but I knew astrology like pretty on a basic level pretty well.
Yeah.
But but at that point, I totally pivoted, and it kind of lined up in the right way to where a lot of the UFO influencers, I guess you could call it back then, or researchers, they actually started for the first time talking about politics and talking about Trump and what he represented to the system and why everyone was freaking out. And it really made it make sense to me because I was just so not used to this type of cycle of politics growing because I paid attention pretty young.
Yeah.
But I'm getting a little sidetracked. That was really the last time. I can't even remember a specific time. It was
Yeah.
something about my identity, and this is how they pulled a lot of people in and continue to
Yeah.
hold people on this political end of everything is their identity and all that. But now, there's a little bit of truth to what a lot of influencers are talking about with like the woke right that's
Oh yeah.
coming in.
Yeah.
I think a lot of those influencers that bring it up, they have agendas, and
Mhm.
but there is an aspect that they necessarily don't touch on that is like, well, that's woke about the right. It's woke in a reverse way,
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
how pious can you be, and how can you be a good Catholic, and this and that, and I love and think there's true value in Catholicism, especially I believe in Christ consciousness personally.
Hmm.
And so I love that Catholicism at least can introduce people to Christ consciousness, to the things that Jesus did and all that. It's just, of course, the dogma of the religion, that very Saturnian aspect of it that can get involved where it restricts people. And that is what Saturn, one of the ways that people view Saturn is like the limiter. I like
Yeah.
to, it's going to push you ahead when you're too far behind, or if you're too far ahead, it's going to pull you back and reel you in. So it kind of just keeps you steady. That's why it's the master of time. It
Yeah.
governs all of that.
The whole Trump thing is has since it started has been such a magnet for everybody. And this is a person who understands show business better than any politician ever has. And he understands ratings. And he he gets the sound clips, he gets all of it. And he treats it like a TV show. And the news channels, they eat it up. And for good reason, their ratings were so high for so long because everywhere the man went, a camera followed him all the time, nonstop. And now we are transitioning to, as you're saying, influencers. It feels like there was an initial movement that started with that, and like all movements, even the Liberal Party, I would say before Obama, all movements get hijacked by a certain wave of people. And I was having this discussion with somebody a few days ago. I think if I was in the 90s, like the way I feel right now, early 90s, I probably would have voted for Bill Clinton. I think I would. I would have 100%. But things shift so quick. And when we talk about the Liberal Party and what it is now with the whole the gender stuff with kids, and all that's going on, it's me as a parent, I'm like, I don't like I, I just don't want my kids involved with that in school. Like I don't want the teachers pushing that on my kids. I just don't. I'm sorry. I don't want the teachers pushing either agenda on my children. I want my children to go there and actually learn math, learn Spanish. History is a whole nother story because personally, I don't know how accurate the history books really are because they're written by Reuters. And science, and because the most important part of science is questioning science and question everything, and that's how you get science. That's how science was invented, was questioning everything. So it seems like to me that this movement that currently started as a good thing because I was all on board with RFK, getting the food dyes out of our food, really digging into the whole vaccine thing. I think it's important. And you see one side of social media say, well, RFK says that autistic children aren't special, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, no, all children are special. That's not what he's saying. He's saying it's maybe preventable. He can't say yes or no for sure it's a preventable, but there's Amish communities out there that don't have autism. So where's the difference? There are certain differences that this culture does compared to Amish communities. If you look in Africa, same thing. And then some will say, well, it's an underdiagnosis. Well, do you think it's possible that we overdiagnose also? So I, when you say going into research, I encourage everybody to do a lot of research because when somebody takes a video and then talks about it and then tries to swing their bias into what they're talking about, it's very influential. And that's why they're called influencers for good reason. But relating that back all to the whole astrology part of it, you were saying to me last episode, this next wave of energy is going to be the people. And it's going to be the people's voice that's really going to speak up. And I have to say, after we got done with the conversation, that was the thing I was most excited about was this opportunity for all of us to have a voice. It's 100 men versus one gorilla, right? That debate online. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone's talking about it. There's a sign of it right there. It- and if we think about it in the respects to the government, why can't we all have a vote on where our tax money goes? Like why can't we have a voice in everything? And if the vote goes away that maybe I don't agree with, that's fine because that's what the country voted for, or that's what the county voted for, or that's what the state voted for. That's fine. We'll just have to I'll deal with it the way I deal with it, and I'll cope with it the way that I cope with it. But I feel like we elect these people in, and we're not allowed to actually dictate what happens. We have to trust that what they're saying is actually what they're going to do.
Yeah, and that's so cool with the 100 men versus one gorilla thing too.
Yeah.
Because it's really, I think, on a macro scale, having people question their relationship to something that at a certain point has just become autonomous and a beast. We're going in and trying to do all of these cuts, and it's being touted as making this huge dent in it. But then when you look to people who are seeming, from my point of view, to stay pretty unbiased, it doesn't seem like it's making much of a dent. It seems like the numbers of the savings of Doge are inflated, and you know it's just so interesting. And some of this we can attribute to the astrology, because it was like a resistance of turning the page with these energies that just put a lot on hold, having you evaluate, and then like moving into like, okay, here's some things you can get, lay the groundwork, and then like push you back to that center. And now we're back in that full on energy of getting things done. And I think it's just interesting as we moved into today with Venus and Aries moving in today. I think it was just a couple of hours ago, uh, that it just RFK Jr. talking about our relationship. It's very much the relationship, the values that come into things, and all that with that Venus energy, and then of course the Aries of that new beginning, of like going through the destruction or the flames of it. Like
Yeah.
kind of in a loose way. I could go a little like deeper, but I'll like leave it at that. Uh, but RFK earlier, just I think this was like 5 hours ago or so. It was, yeah, like around that time. Uh, he was talking about how they found all this child trafficking that was going on, within HHS, within the Health and Human Service. And so this isn't even something like, you know, like that would be much more obvious. It's not where
Yeah.
you are expecting it. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it seems like we're getting the ball rolling again. It was almost like this administration had to buy some time on things, and they were, of course there was that outlandish claim that he made going around anti-Semitism. That
Yeah.
was really interesting, and how that relates to health. It was like this back and forth, this wishy-washiness. The same
Yeah.
same thing with Pam Bondi and all of that. It's almost like people were trying to initiate things and get them rolling, but the energetics just weren't right. So I do think we'll see a lot more action in the months ahead. But this
Yeah.
also isn't me like just shilling for the administration and being like,
No.
oh well, hey, it's gonna just solve all of our problems. We talked about this last time. We're moving into agenda 2030. That's just good, what's gonna happen. So it
That's a
was kind of
world
like,
thing. That's a global thing.
yeah, the
Yeah.
I think this vote was about who do you want piloting, captaining the ship, and even looking at Trump, this is something that we've been talking about in the astrology community. A lot of the bigger astrologers made this prediction in different ways. And, even my astrology community, we were looking at, over the summer as it begins, the algol aspect, which is a star, an alignment of stars there. Algol, or it's a star, but it's in the chart, and it deals, it can deal with this kind of death energy
Yeah.
essentially. And that's Trump was aspecting that planet in an extreme way when the assassination attempt happened.
Right.
And so we've got
Which
him
one?
aspecting that again. Oh, the first one in Butler.
Yeah. Okay.
uh, and we've got that happening in an extreme way again. And then, this is what I'm taking from a bit bigger astrologer, so I won't take credit for this, but we've got Mars moving through his 12th house. And, that's hidden. Mars is the planet of war, of course, the
Wow.
planet of action, of violence. And 12th house is that hidden house. So we're talking about hidden enemies here. And it's just interesting because you've got JD Vance's placements and the way that they work out. He very well could be that hidden enemy. We see what happens when he gets around the Pope, when he goes to India and then leaves, and all hell breaks loose, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And so there's like a whole aspect of these world events of what's going on that we're not even privy to, that we don't even know about. And it makes me want to like tie back to how you were saying at the very beginning of this a few minutes ago, just talking about Trump himself and the phenomena that he is, because
Yeah.
I believe very much in people being magicians and them having astrologers. I mean, they had this in the time of John Dee with Queen Elizabeth, like she was able to make such things happen because she had an esotericist, an astrologer, occultist next to her at all times that guided her on when the alignments were proper to do things. And if people think that there aren't billionaires who also do this on their trades, politicians who are doing this on their world decisions and all that, it's just a function of it. And as far as Trump himself and what he's been taught, we could talk about Roy Cohn and him, how he brought up Trump and showed him how the deep state works and all that. But on the esoteric side, Trump just seems to be a chaos magician. I mean, he's going to be disruptive to anything he comes across.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who are very, going back to earlier, stuck in this Capricorn energy where everything's stable, everything's the same. I said we got the South Node in Virgo. People who are letting go of that are having a great time in life. People who aren't are having a rough time. And this is going on for another year. So it really is. People are just going to get scared. They're going to go into these states of fear. Things are going to happen in their life. Health problems are going to come up because everything just scares them because it's chaos. It's not what they expect. And, this goes into 401ks and all of that, because that's going to be under, different aspects of finance and money and all that can fall under different planets. But in terms of that structure that's been built, that is the 401k that people depend on. I mean, it's very Saturnian, it's very Capricornian. And we see that Saturn planet in a month. It's moving in there. I think there's going to be huge hits in the market.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm trading around in crypto.
Right. So we, what's your opinion on Trump possibly being a time traveler? Have you ever dug into the whole Nikola Tesla thing?
Yeah,
With
I definitely think there's a there
yeah, yeah, and
because
for
yeah.
for anyone that doesn't know, when Nikola Tesla died, apparently he had left behind 200, 300 patents, and there was over half of them missing. And the head of the CIA or the FBI was Trump's uncle. And it's said that Nikola Tesla had discovered time travel. Now, whether or not that's true or not, it's fun to speculate about. But something that's really odd to me, and by the way, this is something that hasn't been brought up until recently, but apparently this book has been around since the 1800s. It's The Adventures of Baron Trump. And it was written by, here, I pulled up when you were talking because something I really want to talk about. It's written by Ingersoll Lockwood. Okay. And then I'm going to read to you real quick the names of these books and just a brief summary of them each. So the first one is Name and Residence. The protagonist's name is Baron Trump, and his residence is Castle Trump, Trump Tower. Bear resemblance to Donald Trump's son, Baron Trump, and Trump Tower. Next one, mentor named Don. His mentor in his book, his name is Don. Baron's guide is named Don, echoing Donald Trump's name. There's a Russian adventure, so Baron's journeys commence in Russia, a detail that has drawn attention given contemporary geopolitical events. Also weird. And then the final story in this book is called The Last President, and it was in 1896. The Last President depicts a populist president election leading to civil unrest in New York City, particularly on Fifth Avenue, where Trump Tower is located. So, have you, in 2016, when Donald Trump was elected and they had the whole Simpsons thing, even before that, when Donald Trump was riding down that escalator, and it's the same exact scene that's in The Simpsons. There was conspiracy theories there, and there was the whole QAnon thing. Never was this book mentioned anywhere. Now this book is everywhere, and it's mentioned everywhere. And it goes back to our conversation in the first episode about like the whole Mandela effect, different realms, bouncing in between different different places at different times. The whole thing is a complete mind fuck. And I just encourage people to look a little bit deeper than what you see on TV because there's something more to what's going on right now and it's not normal. Whatever it is, it's not normal. And I just wanted to get your opinion on the book and the whole idea of him potentially being a time traveler. There's also a lot of old photos that look like them. And there's something about Baron too that's very powerful. When you see him, there's something very powerful about him, and I can't
Yeah,
describe it. I can't.
he's otherworldly. He's
It's it,
supernatural.
it's strange. It's very strange. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It,
Well, as far as the book goes and everything, yeah, like it was interesting. I I felt like I heard about it during COVID,
okay.
and then I went back to look for it, and I couldn't seem to find anything about it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it came back. There was a resurgence of it, and I
Yeah.
was okay, yeah, because I remember I'm like I knew I'm not crazy, but even looking at John G. Trump, and Trump will always reference his uncle.
Yeah.
And of course, you brought this up how he looted the Tesla files. And so he goes on to share this with Vannevar Bush. And Vannevar Bush, when you look into him, he headed up the Majestic 12 program. And the Majestic 12 program had the lock and key on the whole idea of the UFO file, the X files that they made a TV show about. And this goes way deeper. All people have to do is look into these names and see what was going on. But Vannevar Bush, him and James Forrestal, they were around Kennedy and that assassination and everything. And before Kennedy was assassinated, James Forrestal, they said as he started to speak out about the things that were being hidden, all the Area 51 stuff that was going on and what was being hidden there, and this essentially breakaway government that had breakaway technology, things
Hmm.
that they were doing that were under no oversight. James Forrestal got they said he was crazy, hospitalized him, and then he fell out of, I think it was like the 12th story or something of Bethesda Naval Hospital. And
Yeah.
his wife came forward, said he wasn't suicidal or anything,
Yeah.
and implied essentially that he was killed. And then of course JFK, we can talk about the Zionism aspect of JFK. And then there's also the aerospace arm of the government that had broken away that Eisenhower warned about when he left,
Yeah.
and all of that. So it had become this autonomous creature. And JFK himself said he wanted to take the CIA and like crumble it into 1,000 pieces, scatter it to the wind, and all of that. So that wasn't going to work for them because they had already gotten to a point where they were extra governmental, or
Right.
the extra institutional. They there was no more oversight, or they had the last little bits of oversight. But the only reason I bring all of this up is because there is technology that they've clearly been working on. And then we can even just talk about Thomas Townsend Brown and Victor Scharberger, all of these technologies that they were looking into that had to do with harmonics and resonance. There's this I can't believe that I'm forgetting the name of it. It's called like the something like fold, like I think it's called the spatial fold. I'll have to look into it for next time.
Yeah.
But this is just one technology that's actually come out, and all of this stuff is available through a great scholar that I think he's incredible. He's been around for years, at least 10 years, I think probably more. Dark journalist. Daniel List is his real name, but his channel is Dark Journalist. And he's just got so much content, anything that you can really think of that gets into a lot of these different topics, whether it's spiritual or this stuff that's very much stuff you need to have documented on paper as your proof. And he's got it. He's very big on that documentation. Maybe I have an affinity because he's a Taurus like me, but no, but he talks about a lot of these technologies, and that's one of them. That this
Yeah.
spatial fold technology, and they were running a current through it. It was creating when people would walk into the fold of what it was through this high voltage, they would see their whole life, like their life would flash before their eyes, almost like a near death experience. But they would see their past and they would see their future. At least it would be the what they ended up figuring out is it was the potentiality in your future based on your current trajectory.
Is-
But and so this kind of gets into like, well, if that's what they were doing, and we're talking about the 50s and the 60s
right.
going on here,
Where are we now?
what was, and so that would be stuff that a lot of these elites have access to. I mean, it's just very interesting that you see, like, what was it? Has it been one president, and he was the one of like the ones that's been through an embarrassment tour, essentially, uh, that has been diagnosed with cancer. Like they clearly got a different type of healthcare that's going on. They've got Catherine Austin Fitts, who's been on Dark Journalist channel before.
Yeah.
She was the former secretary for housing and urban development. I think it was like assistant secretary, but she just went on Tucker Carlson and was saying, and she's been on record with all of this stuff about the secret space program, about the breakaway civilization that exists, the trillions missing from the Pentagon, how all these things are tied together and all that. So she's been on the record with this for probably about 10 years. Like I think exactly 10 years actually. Um, but she was on Tucker Carlson talking about all of the underground bases and that they've got and the
Yeah.
tunnel systems and even people as far back as Phil Schneider talked about this. So really what we're seeing right now, and of course it ties right into the astrology, is like all of these artificial systems are falling away, these facades that have been created, and we're going to start to look behind the curtain on everything. And I think as we see these planets come in, the Saturn coming into Aries, the Neptune that's now in Aries, and all that, but these are going to retrograde back out towards the end of the year. So I think
Right.
we're going to see behind this curtain, we're going to see all the things that are going on, and people are going to be shocked, but it will be like, okay, here's what it is, can you accept it? And then it will have this illusion of moving back into the old system, and you're really going to see the people around you. It's going to happen in all of our lives too. It's just going to be insane. But the people around you who can't handle the way the world's really been operating, what we're going to be showing about it when it does go back to normal for a second, or there's some semblance of normality, and they're calm. They're like, oh, okay, it was all good. We're all good. Okay, that wasn't really like that was just some crazy thing that happened in the politics, or whatever they want to blame it on and project it on. Those are going to be the people you got to kind of watch out for, because once that energy comes back at the beginning of next year and it can't be swept under the rug any longer,
Yeah.
what are these people going to do? And this is like as far as guidelines go for the video, I'll kind of be light on or vague on how I describe the dream, but this is a recurring dream that I have, people getting information that's just so bad to their mental state that they go walk on top of a building and keep walking.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that I've thought about a lot when they talk about releasing the UFO information and a bunch of confidential information. How does the whole general public handle it? And I do understand why things are kept confidential because if you're running a colony of people, sometimes less is better. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're lying to somebody, but it just means that, and this sounds kind of bad, I guess, but you're maintaining control. But in some ways, control and law are good because then it keeps things safe. And I think a lot about that. And maybe what we're diving into isn't really actually for everybody. When you mention technologies the elites had, one big one that the Nazis had. Nazis were so far ahead of everybody, by the way. There's another thing to really dig really deep into and I know how horrific they were, but they were so far advanced ahead of everybody. They had VR in the 20s and 30s, and that's something you can look up and verify. Um, but I mean, if you look at a German car compared to an American car, if you look at a 2010 Malibu in comparison to a 2010 Volkswagen, the differences in amenities and ride are like are night and day. So they're still ahead. But one thing that America did absorb after World War II was somebody named Werner von Braun, who happened to be the head of NASA. And a lot of conspiracy theorists will say that NASA is a shadow government for the Nazis. Well, that may or may not be true. What is interesting is all of a sudden we developed a space program when we absorbed one of the main Nazi scientists, and it kind of goes all all over the map. You know, with the whole Nazi theory, like the Argentinian president is now releasing the files that Hitler did actually escape to Argentina.
I
And,
was
you
gonna
know,
bring that up.
there's
Yeah.
Bavarian villages in Argentina and Chile that are still very, very heavily infested with Nazis. And then, have you ever dug into that whole Admiral Byrd
Oh yeah.
story? And
Hmm.
then in the 40s, 50s, Admiral Byrd was instructed to go see what's going on in Antarctica. And this is his journal. This was an established pirate, or not pirate, pilot. And Admiral Byrd was sent to go see what's going on in the Antarctica, and he kept flying, and all of a sudden he encountered a breakaway civilization. But before that, they were thinking, oh, the Nazis have some sort of technology over there. So I guess the broader point that I'm pointing out that you had also brought up is the technology that we have it in front of us right now is nothing compared to the technology that the government has at the moment, meaning tying this all back to the whole Donald Trump's time travel thing that this absolutely 100% could be possible with the possibilities that are in front of us. Why not speculate and think about it? His ability to call things before they happen and his ability to really be be polarizing on TV is something that almost seems like he knew it in advance. And even the assassination attempt, I mean, what are the odds of him turning his head like that? Either they planned it to get more votes because oh they tried to take out a president, I'm going to vote for him, or he knew it was going to happen before it happened.
Yeah, there's a ritualistic feel to it,
Yeah,
and there's that the technology that all these elites have access to that we're just unaware of, and then there's like the this energetic side of it, this Kabbalah, and I use Kabbalah loosely, but really just hidden knowledge side of it, and they've got all of these old practices that just go back and back and back. They can trace their bloodline back to like Babylon or whatever,
yeah, yeah,
for whichever bloodline, and they keep these genetic records and all the knowledge that they've built up over all this time. So they know how to perform rituals on the mass populace. And you combine this with the technology. I mean, these technology wars that were going on in the 50s, you can go back as far as 1880, 1870, the airships and the Sonora Aero Club, all of this that sprung out to what became the cult, I guess, or the Society of the Black Sun that was in Germany, the Thule Society, all of these different German secret societies that rose up were able to develop this sophisticated technology. A war happens. A lot of these wars were over the technologies that were being developed by the secret societies and who was going to come out on top. And then
yeah,
the whole idea was that this would be shared with humanity, but instead it's just interspersed amongst the elites. They've
yeah.
used it and combined it with occult practices,
Right.
and they're just playing with all of this energy magic on the population. And it's just, I mean, it's not going to fly anymore. Too many people are waking up. And so I think that's the part that's going to be very hard for people. I think the UFO stuff is they pretty much admitted it at this point, and no one seems to care.
Yeah.
Like I
Oh,
think it's
I think a
all of
lot of us
the
just are calling their bullshit. Even when they say, "Oh, we're going to release the JFK files," how do we even know that they're legit? Is this just a stunt or is it real? We don't, and I think a lot of us, myself included, when I hear things like here's UFOs, here's JFK files, here's the Epstein files, how do I know any of it's not bullshit? It's almost impossible at this point to really tell because we weren't there. It's just what's documented. And how many times has it been altered? Has it been altered? Is it not altered? Oh, we'll give you the redacted version. So then there's parts of it that are blacked out. So are you really releasing it? I,
Yeah, well, and it gets into the astrology, and it gets into what dark journalist says, because dark journalists is like we have to get this information out ourselves and find the documentation because it's there, and
yeah,
there's so much there, and I mean it's very obvious who did JFK, like who all was involved, all the parties were involved. You can
yeah,
really just find the information yourself, but people are waiting for it to come
yeah.
from the government, and it's just not going to happen because
No,
that system only seeks to preserve itself. And when they're
yeah, yeah,
not only complicit but implicit in a lot of the sectors in what happened, it's just like, what are you? And then another thing that he'll talk about is who are the people releasing this information, or especially with the UFO stuff, all these people are counterintelligence, and counterintelligence shifted in like the 80s. That's
right,
being generous, more like in like the 70s,
right,
from doing all of these missions abroad to lying to the American people
right.
at home. So it's that's like what their job is to lie and to mislead the American people and to keep them from learning too much about what all of the intelligence agencies are doing. But and then just tying this kind of back around to the astrology too, is the people are going to be the ones to bring all of this knowledge out. And it's a little bit of it's going to have to do with AI,
Yeah,
and all the systems are going to collapse, and the things that will come out of these collapsing systems, and when people find out what's being done to children, and how they're parts of these occult, I think that's the occult satanic type of rituals, the way children are being used, all
yeah,
of these magics that are being put on people. I think that's what's really going to shock people and really cause the truest mass awakening. And it'll be really traumatic for the society, I think, too. That's like really what we're coming into. It's just this burning away of so much, and it's going to be so traumatic, but it's like so much more beautiful on the other side, because we've got these two tracks that we're running
yeah.
of closer to about like JFK or Eisenhower,
Mm,
of where like, okay, there was some stuff behind it, but we needed the control, we needed the secrecy for this and this and that, like you were saying. And then there was the public facing, but these things broke away from one
yeah,
another, and they're getting like farther and farther away in the world that's going on and the technologies that exist and the breakaway civilization that exists within it, and then the rest of the civilization. And then you have events like 9/11, or the assassination of JFK, or even COVID here too, where this
yeah,
whole continuity of government apparatus with emergency powers shows itself, puts something on the population, on humanity. And then for the years afterwards, we're sitting here scratching our heads, wondering what happened and picking everything apart. And then they just kind of pull back for a little bit. And it seems like they're kind of breathing down our necks right now, ready to come in and cause something else again. But it's just this repeat that they keep doing. And if you notice the length of time between these events, it's getting shorter and shorter because they're
yeah,
requiring more interference to keep that control on, because it's just not going to last anymore. And so right now it seems like, well, how are we going to really sell this to the people? We've been fighting aliens in space, and do like a fake alien invasion or whatever they got to do, like,
yeah,
and like, this is why we lied to you, this is why all the money is missing. But there is this, the breakaway civilization has to break back in to what's going on with the society, or it's just going to keep creating more and more of a psychosis, because there's this whole hidden aspect of our society. And so now they're trying to figure out how to break that back in. Is it going to be, and this is where I get a little worried about a false awakening, because it
yeah.
seems like they're priming us for a false awakening where they're going to purposely wake people up, but it's going to be controlled disclosure.
Right, right. The way that they would want it.
Exactly. Still
Yeah.
trying to maintain that control, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's some great points for sure. I I personally think that no matter what comes out, just based on the overall response from either side, is going to be 40% that are just you could put a video in front of somebody that's 100% legit and they're going to say, "Eh, AI." Or and maybe that's where the controlled awakening is AI is getting so good that you can then duplicate something that looks real that really isn't, or something's real and then it's all of a sudden it's the boy who cried wolf. But I just I know exactly what you're saying, and I've been following it for 5 or 6 years, waiting for whatever it is about to happen because it feels like the pressure cooker is ready to blow at this point. But I just feel like there's going to be half the country that's going to be like, that's not the way that one news source tells it, so I'm not going to believe it. Just
Hmm.
kind of seems like the
And
state we're in.
we can talk about how few of us there are that are really awake to what's going on, but it's actually shocking how many of us there are too, because we are few in
2020
number.
really woke a lot of us up
Hmm.
big time.
It's like we're embedded though, because I'll randomly meet people and they just seem like, like, not to use a term like this, but they just seem like normies, and then out of nowhere they know this stuff.
A sheeple.
Yeah, like we know how to interact in this normal
Yeah,
world
right.
and everything, but then when we kind of get that opening, all of a sudden we can talk about all of these things. And I'm just noticing that happen more and more, of course, since 2020, because in 2016, I mean, talking about this was insane. And
QAnon.
my true awakening was, oh yeah, QAnon. And QAnon is really interesting because there's some pretty incredible proofs that predicted things that really came true,
Yep.
especially that Archangel Michael one was pretty chilling, where he tweeted the exact same thing with the timestamp and all of that.
Really, really.
But it seems like a counterintelligence operation. So
Right.
so even that has seemed to manipulate us in some ways, and it's gotten a bit out of hand.
It's another movement that was hijacked, essentially. And that's kind of what we were
Hmm.
talking about earlier. Our every single movement that you see gets hijacked by some sort of special interest. And you know, I don't want to get too controversial, but there's a lot of people that say we didn't elect Elon Musk. We didn't choose this. And well, first of all, you didn't even vote for Donald Trump in the first place, either. So, but the point that I'm making is what his job was is to get rid of bureaucrats that were working for the government that we were paying. And it's the same thing in these movements. These are special interests. These are bureaucrats that are counterintelligence that go into these movements, and they they point on things that are so controversial that half of the crowd that follows it's going to believe it no matter what it is. And then all of a sudden it becomes a hot topic on the internet and then people are fighting and arguing about it.
Yeah, they really know these pressure points. And
They're so good at it. So good.
well, and you've got this whole idea of the 33rd degree of masonry, the 33rd parallel, and that's where JFK was assassinated, where MLK was assassinated. And then now we just have this total ritualized strange thing. And I have to give, my astrologer Robert Phoenix credit for this, because he did the deep dive on it. Like, I'm just explaining the astrology and the energetics behind it, but this whole Austin Metcalf situation,
Oh
that
yeah.
happened on the 33rd parallel there. And then there's all this Gemini energy that's behind it, like the idea that it's twins. And then on the same day, a different Carmelo Anthony received like a Hall of Fame award, and he's not
I was gonna
even
say that name
a
when I saw that
popular.
name. I was like, is that the basketball player? But
Yeah, and
yeah.
but on the same day he received. So it's like there's this. They do these rituals, and there's this like bleed out of energy, and then that Carmelo Anthony's son looks just like the Carmelo Anthony who did the stabbing, and you can trace back. the lawyer and who's representing the family, the black
Yeah, it
family,
just
and then
goes,
like,
goes.
oh yeah, yeah, he's interesting. But
Oh,
he's got really interesting connections, and that's why he's been able to stay out of prison
yeah.
and all that. But you know, secret society
It's just
connections that are just
so,
so interesting.
so
And
interesting.
there's even something odd going on with the dad. It's almost like a humiliation ritual or something, like, you
Wow.
know, like, and I won't even try to like get into that or make too many assumptions about that, but there is just this strange energy that's going on around the whole thing, and then it's being transmuted into, you know, and this is mostly in the online space I'm seeing it, but
Yeah,
it's becoming like this point. It seems like they're trying to use it as the point for a race war, but it's just not really landing. So
not
it's
anymore.
like, unless they can get something with it to land, they'll have to try another one, or they'll have to do a false flag. Like you're talking about with this pressure cooker idea, they know the pressure cooker is going to explode, but they're trying to control how it happens so they can direct the energy of humanity. And that's why this whole idea of these transits that Trump are going through are really interesting to me, because that would be the only way to really, I mean, look at how people were, including myself some extent, you know, the first assassination attempt against, I mean, that like very much catalyzed something within me,
Yeah,
because it just was showing how close things were getting to where the controllers of our society, the social engineers, were not happy with the direction it was going, that they
right.
had to do something that desperate and try to repeat what happened to JFK, you know. So that, but that would be something if they were able to, and God forbid, of course, we don't want anyone to ever get hurt, but if they were able to do something to Trump like that, you know, because JD Vance is backed by Peter Thiel,
Yes.
you know, and like, I'm not a fan of Peter Thiel and his degeneracy. Like, I may be a gay man, but I can understand a degenerate person when I see one, you know. And I think I'm the only homosexual who, I should say, I'm only person allowed to, as a homosexual, call out degenerate homosexuals and the things that they do to really get into the society that was built on men and women
Yeah.
being able to create a family and have a nuclear family, you know. And I won't go down the whole of queer Marxism and all that. I totally could, and it's shocking.
Next
But no,
episode.
like, this guy is not a friend of the society in the way we have it. And of course, he's one of the tech oligarchs. So Peter Thiel backing JD Vance, and if JD Vance could take the reins, I mean, the things that he's going to do are going to be, and we were seeing the trail that JD Vance is leaving wherever he goes. So
Right.
it just doesn't, it seems like that is the play right now,
Yeah.
but could be wrong.
Here's a big timeline change, and then I'm going to ask you the final question.
All right.
It has to do with quantum computing or quantum physics. Trump dies. Elon doesn't buy Twitter. What happens to this world? And those are the two big things that we need, I think, as a society, need to think about where the world goes if that bullet hits Trump in the head. And then also before that, let's say Elon never buys Twitter. It's it's almost impossible to think about because both of those things were on the verge of going a whole different direction. And
Yeah, and just remembering the energy around that time, like,
yeah,
they were pivotal energetic points.
yeah. And it's it's something that why waste your time to think about, but also as we're approaching this new era of quantum computing, it might be something worth understanding because there is a world where Trump doesn't turn his head. And it goes back to the whole timeline thing or the whole time travel thing is okay, maybe that's why he turned his head because time travel told him to do it. Another realm where he doesn't. There's also a realm where Jack Dorsey retains Twitter, and the gal that was the CEO was the one that was monetizing it, never sells it, and we're now in a reality where everything was censored and almost anyone that said something controversial was just banned off of Twitter. And Twitter is like the town hall of the world. And there are things on there that are not, you know, politically correct. Almost everything I read is outlandish and outrageous, but that's the point. That's and those things also wouldn't be as amplified if we just never gave it any kind of attention. So it's something fascinating to think about. So here's my final question. It has nothing to do with what I just said. I just wanted to throw it out there. 100 men or one gorilla? What are you picking and why?
Oh man. It's so funny because I haven't even given it much thought because it felt very psyopy.
It's very
People were
psyopy. Like
very fixated on it. So I was like,
let's
I'm
buy
not
into
even
it.
gonna
Let's buy into it.
but but now it's so I really am thinking about it for the first time right now because I was like,
Yeah.
no, just don't go there whenever I'd scroll past it.
Yeah, yeah.
Gosh. You know, and I don't know the specifics of the argument and what people are allowed to use and stuff and all that. I'm assuming it's like
Bear,
bare-fisted, but
bear. Yep. Nope, no weapons. No weapons.
okay.
So my train of thought on this is the men, 100 of them would beat one gorilla. But is that me as a human thinking that I have superiority because we are technically on the top of the food chain? Only because we have the intelligence to make weapons, use weapons. I kind of think a gorilla would scrub 100 men. Only because I feel like my ego is in the way of a human defeating an animal, even if it's 100 of us.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that I want to sit there and I'm like, is it my ego or anything? But I do lean towards the 100 men just because it almost reminds me of Bug's Life and the ants versus grasshoppers thing. Like, like you get enough ants.
Ants are strong fuckers, man. I've seen videos where those things will rope each other from one side of a house to another. Ants are a
Well,
whole
and that's how
nother.
we are too as
Yeah, that's
humans.
true.
We're
That's
so
true.
much stronger than we look. Our bodies are so complex. We have access to these things typically that we don't access.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about the psychic part, but just
Right.
physically and with our
Right.
physical strength. But so I think I would lean towards the humans, at
Okay.
least if anything for my mental health.
That's great. That's great. Do you before we sign off, do you want to mention your Instagram page or
Yeah,
plug
I
your
think I'm just gonna be using my personal. I mean,
Okay.
it's an interesting kind of journey of my life through COVID and where my mental state is at. Like I never delete anything off of Instagram.
Yeah.
So that's Classy Raffi.
Classy Raffy. Okay.
Raffi, Classy Raffi, all
Okay.
one word. For
Okay.
Instagram, yeah. If I end up making some newer social medias, I'll end up doing that like I do have for my crystal business,
Yeah.
lightly utilized right now, but
Okay.
it's Aquarian underscore antiquities for that. So I mean, I'm gonna start posting more crystals on there to sell and trying to get a website started up here. Really, just about the time management
Okay.
and it seems like it's really unfolding though for the time management. That's how I've been able to make this time and all that, figuring out
Yeah.
what's important as in terms of working out and when you can fit it in and all that, and not getting too absorbed. That was kind of the energy towards the end of last year, is going too extreme
Yeah.
on health stuff and devoting all my time to it and then not enough time for the business stuff, the Capricorn stuff, because we'll always be working a little bit with that energy, but
Okay. All right. I'll
now
throw
I'm
it in
starting
the
to
Go ahead. You're starting to what? I'm sorry.
just starting to really find that proper balance, and it's as the energy shift, which is the ironic part, but
That's good. I'll put it in the description for you too. So, other than that, thank you. We'll do this again in next week, I'm sure, and
oh yeah,
we'll
I'll get a
continue.
mic by then, so
We'll have a
that'd
mic,
be
and then
great.
we'll really dive in. So, thank you for listening. Hit that like and subscribe.